All right, great. All right, good morning. I'm Nancy King, and I'll be moderating this panel today, Pokemon Go, the phenomenon of AR gets real, gateway to the future. So what does Pokemon Go's success actually mean for the future of augmented reality? Well, I'm going to quote a July Fortune magazine online article that said, "Disruption is, in fact, as much about social evolution as it is about technological improvement. Pokemon Go may be a game for teens and millennials, but it has irrevocably changed societal expectations of what information is presented and how it's accessed. It will be this shift in public expectations that nudges companies from all sectors to aggressively invest in AR. Technology improvement is never driven by mad scientists alone. They always need market support. So whether you're an entrepreneur or head of a multinational corporation, never dismiss a teenage passion as a mere toy. More often than not, disruption begins with some teenage pastime." So this morning, we're going to talk about what's going on in the evolution of augmented reality, how companies are embracing it, and what this means to the Hollywood creative community. So starting with Don, would you introduce yourself and give us a brief background of your company?
My name is Don Daglow, and I'm from Daglow Entertainment. I also had a small startup called Fourth Ring, where we're working on new kinds of sports games. And I think I'm on this panel. I have a little bit of experience with new hardware. I was actually one of those lucky kids who in the 1970s was a university student writing games on mainframes before the video game business started. And so when the industry began, I was one of the original 5 programmers on Intellivision for Mattel Toy Company at the time when you couldn't turn on a television at night without Atari and Intellivision telling you why their video game system was better in the first round of console wars. From there I went to a little startup called Electronic Arts, which worked out pretty well, and then ran Broderbund's entertainment and education division. And then for 20 years, founded and led my own AAA console studio called Stormfront Studios, where we'd be best known for the first PC versions of Madden Football. We created the NASCAR racing franchise, the Lord of the Rings, the Two Towers. We also did games like Neverwinter Nights and the role-playing arena as well. And for the last 8 years, I've been working primarily in mobile and online games, alternating between work as a game designer and doing strategic consulting and advice for publishers and for developers. So my perspective on this and the kind of work I do, because I've been part of every generation of hardware thus far in the history of the industry, I actually have one PS4 project I'm advising now. I look at AR as not just a unique event, because I think in many ways it is a unique event, but I look at it as part of a history of the introduction of new hardware to our industry.
Great.
I'm Jules Verback, the co-founder and CEO of Otoy. And Otoy is best known for contributing in 3 areas of technology, capturing the real world into holographic assets through Lightstage, which won an Academy Award in 2010 for our work on Benjamin Button and Avatar. Also rendering, we have a product called Octane Render, which is very popular for doing GPU rendering for films and now games. And just recently, the opening of Westworld was done with our software. And then the third part of our company is focused on publishing and streaming holographic content. And that didn't used to mean a whole lot until you had immersive devices and AR glasses and now VR devices that can consume holographic streams and allow that experience to really be beamed into your eyes. So we have been doing a lot of good work with Oculus. We powered Oculus 360 photos last year with our rendering technology. And just last week, we announced a partnership with Disney, where Disney.com, Marvel.com, ESPN.com, and ABC.com are all streaming into Oculus Social, soon the Samsung browser, and pretty much any device that can consume AR or VR. We want to have an immersive holographic web that'll empower new types of applications that are not limited to the app model or the web model.
Great.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brian Selzer. I'm a digital media executive for the last 20 years, going through all spectrums of online, through mobile, and for the past 8 years, I've been focused in the immersive technology space, augmented reality primarily. I'm currently at a company downtown LA called Daiquiri, which is focused on enterprise augmented reality for the workforce with a product that is called the Smart Helmet, which is a hard hat that has an augmented reality field on it for workers to have digital content in front of them contextually relevant to their environments. Previous to that, and probably the reason I'm on this panel, I had a startup called Augmento, which was early in the game space, and our secret sauce, if you will, was location-based services and augmented reality. So if it sounds familiar, it's very much similar to the Pokemon Go platform. And we were in 2010 putting out games based on IP like Paranormal Activity, ghost hunting in the real world. We did an NBA game. We did a project with Microsoft and Halo, tied in with locations like 7-Elevens and products like Pepsi, so very familiar with the marketing aspects of location-based games. And it's fun to see the awareness finally happen with the Pokemon Go on the power of this type of platform, and definitely have a lot of opinions on the platform based on my experience with Augmento. And that's pretty much it. Looking forward to the discussion.
Excellent.
Hi, I'm Craig Allen, and I'm a creative strategist. My background, I worked at Disney for a lot of years back in the Lion King days doing video games based on the film properties. And then I went to the Jim Henson Company and worked with performance and building graphics that were performed instead of animated, and doing game projects and internet-y things. Started my own company as a game developer, and we did the first Call of Duty game for consoles back in 2004. Did some other things, and then a couple years ago took a break and just kind of stepped back and started thinking about what is community, how do we relate globally, how do we maybe start to think differently about our social connections. And with augmented reality and virtual reality, I see the same kind of wave of transition hitting the world that moved us from the internet to desktops to mobile. Augmented reality is going to just be ubiquitous. It's another wave that will transform every business. And so thinking about how that affects not just game playing, but how we use data. For me, what games do is that they take voluminous amounts of data and reduce it into an interface for better decision making. So your health becomes little heart containers that give you quick feedback and allow you to do risk assessment. How much do I want risk versus reward? So as we look at building all this data in the world and how do we make sense of it, that's what I like to work with partners on. And then I think why I'm on this panel is that one of my clients is a group called Father.io, and they're making the world's first action game for augmented reality and massive role play online. Basically laser tag or paintball for your phone with up to 256 players playing in a battlefield on any playground you want to make into a place to play. So excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you.
My name is Dimitri Shapiro. I'm CEO of a company called GoMeta. It is less than 2 months old and still in stealth mode, so unfortunately I can't share too much with you about what it is, but soon you will find out. We're making a product called Metaverse, and those of you who've read books like Snow Crash or Ready Player One can get sort of an idea of the kinds of things we're talking about. And at this moment, we're building the Logos, the laws of nature, basically, that would support this new metaverse. Prior to this, I spent just over 4 years at Google working on social identity and kids initiatives. Prior to that, I was the Chief Technology Officer of MySpace. And then prior to that, I built 3 other venture-backed companies, none of which have anything to do with games.
Okay, thanks.
Hello, everybody. I'm Anjali Shastri. I'm from Intel. I'm with a client computing group responsible for design strategy. Now, I'm the outlier in this space, I guess. Why Intel? Intel's transforming from a company that was a PC company to a company that powers the cloud and billions of smart connected computing devices. We're a part of every facet of the virtuous cycle if you consider the cloud, the data center on one end, the Internet of Things on the other side, the memory, the FPGAs, binding it all, the high-speed connectivity, and of course at the bottom of it all, I have to say the economics of Moore's Law. Devices, nowadays, I mean, technology, what does it do? The value used to be about devices, now it is about experiences. So Intel's no more this ingredient company that we are used to. It's no more just about the chip that power all our devices, but it's about the experiences that they enable. Now, my particular group within the company, it's all about that. Take the coolest of the Intel technologies and bring them to life. All the way from your smallest of handheld devices to your notebooks to your desktops, and then the new class, the future of the PCs, which is your VR, AR, the converged mobility, the IoT devices. So from a client perspective, I'm about all the devices that make it happen.
Great. Thank you, distinguished panel. Okay, now we're going to start with Pokemon Go. We have to give Niantic Labs their due respect for the phenomenon that they've created with Pokemon Go. So although we've heard that some of the key statistics, such as active daily users, are down, you have to admit that 100 million downloads is no small thing, and they haven't even completed their worldwide launch yet. So what do you think is the secret sauce to their success? Or maybe it was just a perfect storm of events and variables, but I can't wait to hear what the panel has to say about that. So I'll let you guys start.
I'll start. Yeah, I mean, you use the term perfect storm, and I use that term all the time. I mean, I think it was the right IP. I think it was the IP that made it such a hit with the right combination of features. The location-based features are very powerful. It's called an augmented reality game, and that's great for the augmented reality industry because we get to sort of ride that wave. But in reality, the augmented reality features are not that sophisticated and not relevant to the gameplay. But the power of location and having a game that feels like it's in the world with you is a very powerful thing. The augmented reality is great for that, with just that even quick view of seeing a character and getting that sort of synaptic brain connection of, hey, there's digital characters all around me relevant to my location, is a very powerful thing. I think we'll see a great continuation of that theme. But as far as the ability to recreate what Niantic Labs has done, which comes from a lot of Google technology, very sophisticated technology on location data, and the servers around that, very, very sophisticated game from that standpoint. Having done those games in the past with Augmento, that type of a game, it's a lot of pieces to put together. We were very early in trying to train people to look through their mobile device at the world. That was sort of a new concept of not just taking a picture, but using it to see digital content. There's the issue of arm fatigue for any kind of a lengthy AR experience when you're holding up mobile devices, which is why I'm very attracted to the wearable space, which is moving very quickly. We have wearable devices here, and that's really where I think the next really big wave on the consumer side is going to happen, is when we start getting to the wearables, which I think is still years off for the consumer side, but it's exciting to think about the idea of being able to just go back and forth between what we see here and then overlaying that digital content. So that's a little hint of some of the ideas and thoughts I have.
Jumping in, everybody?
Well, I think one comment I'll make about the fall off that they have had, because I really agree with what Brian said, is that when one of these hits, if you have a game, especially in the online space, that is has a massive audience of any kind, what will happen is typically what you actually hope for is you start with a closed beta, then you gradually open it and you get the aficionados first and you tune the game with the aficionados. And then gradually you start to build your audience and you reach a mass audience. This lets you fix whatever misconceptions you have as a designer one at a time or as a design team. And I will tell you, after 45 years of game design, I have never certainly had a first-time game design that turned out to be any good. It's what you do with it once you start to see the problems that is the actual craft of game design. Well, what happened with Niantic and Pokemon Go is that because it exploded and was so successful so quickly, they had to deal with all of the issues that come out. First of all, of simply once you get scale and you have that many players. Secondly, of having both the aficionados and people who were not really familiar with mobile games playing all at once, with all of the logistical issues of the load on the servers. So it was that perfect storm, again. And so what we see is they had problems. That is normal. If you look at the history of any of the online games that have exploded very early in their history and popularity, perhaps not at this scale, but you see that same problem. So the question is not did they have those problems. The problems were actually predictable. It's part of the craft. The art is in what they do with it next.
Very good.
I think that with Pokemon, like you said, the perfect storm is really what contributed to that being such a breakout event. Nintendo had not been doing mobile content, and there was this huge pent-up demand for Nintendo brands on a ubiquitous platform that Nintendo didn't create. So at this opportunity to now tap into a cross-generational love of the characters and the properties, it creates a flashpoint through a relatively simple application. And it's interesting, again, kind of talking about the consumer versus the people that make these things, and like Don is saying, the evolution of design. Niantic actually had made a game called Ingress before Pokemon Go, which was a much more deep experience, game-centric strategy simulator that very few people know about. And they basically stripped out all the complex engineering stuff and made a very simple layer on top of that understructure and had Pokemon Go. So I think, if they hadn't done Ingress first, they wouldn't have been in a position to draw in the locations and the Pokestop type points of interest. And they wouldn't have had the base experience of how to build that community. So just really a great pivot, and it'll be interesting to see where they go next, because there'll be more content in this direction.
There's another element to the discussion with the GPS and the location that you talked about. There's the social aspect of it, because it's getting you in tune with the community you're around. So the Pokemons that you find, it gets you to find out your neighborhood. If you start playing, some of the intricate gyms and the Pokestops that they have are at the libraries, the local joints and stuff. So it's a way, I think, they have taken the next step to actually take a game where you would be playing in-house, take a game, get the community of people, but you're not just playing with them, you're now getting in tune with the community. So that's a big one that I came up with.
And the community in terms of monetization strategy is, I think, really exciting if people have been in the game industry. Historically, our revenue has always been off of players. So we sell them products, we sell them subscriptions, we sell them microtransactions. We really haven't been ad supported like television, magazines. We've been a purchasing entity. And with Pokestops, being able to have like a pizza parlor sponsor something to share with the community that draws the community in is a significant new way to monetize game players. And it's going to widen the field for who can participate in these kind of experiences and basically grow the user base, I think, quite dramatically, because now you're going to remove a friction point of players playing because they can actually be gifted by the community, which is, I think, really cool too.
I think it's all about human nature. By the way, I spent the last year sitting next to the guy who was the original product manager for Niantic at Google, and spent quite a bit of time discussing, is it Pokemon or is it something else? And here's where I sort of fall. If you were to take human existence, it's going to get a little weird here, but this is AR, right? If you were to take human existence and model it as a game pattern, what game pattern would you model it after? Well, Alan Watts, who was a great philosopher, said it's the game of hide and seek. I would say something similar, but I'd say it's the game of scavenger hunt. Pokemon Go is a scavenger hunt. And human beings are predisposed to love scavenger hunts because that's what we do. Every morning we get up and we look for something yummy and something interesting and something better than what we had before. And no matter how much of it we have, we're always hungry for more. And they simply greased the wheels a little bit and said, let's put more of these fun things around the world. The world, we sort of walk around it, we tend to get lost and not pay attention to it because we're sort of consumed by our own distractions. And they said, hey, hold on, there are going to be funny little creatures around. And all of a sudden we start noticing our neighborhoods and our neighbors, and the fact that we're still hungry and we want more. And it's a perfect storm targeting human nature, and that's super important.
Great answer.
I would add that, you know, all these comments have been great. I mean, obviously, the fact that it is a big brand helped. Casual social interactions, you know, that this mixed with location-based content was really powerful. And it's also, you know, as we look towards the future, where if this scale worked well with an iPhone, you know, it is exciting to think about what happens in 2 years when, you know, your iPhone's on your, you know, in a pair of glasses. And, you know, I think that this proves that this model and this path is very powerful. And it was really exciting for us to see that work even now, that knowing that, you know, the scale of that and the kinds of applications that this points to are going to be pretty commonplace with wearables in 2 years.
Right. I would also just like to add that there's a nostalgia and collectability from, you know, the Pokemon franchise from 20 years ago, and for everybody that experienced that or had children, it's a really interesting feeling, brings a lot of joy back to a lot of people. All right, so let's switch and talk about what's going on in augmented reality today. What is going on, and what do you think needs to happen in the industry to help keep the interest of the general population and still moving forward? Jules, do you want to start?
Well, yeah, I mean, I can start by sort of thinking about the devices that are coming. I brought a pair of prototypes from ODG, which are, you know, they're getting smaller. These glasses are 4K. It's pretty amazing. The entire phone, everything's in there, and they exist now. So to me, the trend is for mass adoption is going to be when these things really do get to be a pair of glasses with all the power of your smartphone, and you have at least 2K in each eye. That's going to give you something that allows you to replace almost every other screen, and that's kind of why you see the major investments even from Microsoft and of course Google and Facebook. You know, Facebook's new Oculus device is not just a standalone VR headset. It also has enough cameras and sensors, as Michael Abrash was pointing out in the keynote, that you can turn on the cameras and actually go from VR to AR. And that's going to be a device that's going to be out on the market next year. So I think the idea of really seeing the convergence between VR and AR is just almost two sides of the same immersive computing experience will be doable, and that's what we're focused on as far as building content layers and you know, thinking about the platforms of the future.
Great.
You mentioned you know, the hardware form factor towards wearables. We'll see adoption of that. We're seeing with HoloLens and the ODGs in the workforce. That's where DAQRI is focused right now. From a consumer standpoint, probably more fashionable, like regular glasses, and you get into all sorts of issues with cameras pointing at the world. And it's good. I think it's going to take a while for wearables on a Pokemon Go scale, augmented reality. But it's fun to track that and watch that evolution, and clearly it's relevant today, and there's business today around that. On the augmented reality side, though, the Pokemon Go augmented reality is just using sensors. It's not really using any recognition or tracking of the environment, which is where the more sophisticated devices come in. You've got depth sensing cameras now that can truly map out your environment and lock in and register digital content to that, understanding what it is. It's a much more sophisticated computer vision, which is where augmented reality is in enterprise. It will eventually get over on the consumer side too, and then those experiences start really getting magical when you feel like there's a character sitting in the room with you. I think we're a long way off from that from the consumer side, but it is happening in enterprise. And that's why I like to play in that space right now, because it's the level of mixed reality where that illusion of digital and physical really intertwined, where you can get characters walking behind things and you get occlusion and all that kind of stuff is happening now. It's really exciting. So from the evolution of AR, that's kind of another area to look at, is the actual computer vision side of it. So, yeah.
Great.
I mean, I think what's exciting right now is that we're like at the stage of Pong, right? If you go back and think about all the processing power that was able to create a paddle, another paddle, a dot, and a score table, right? That was the state of the art. And now we have immersive worlds like Call of Duty where it's approaching photorealism. We have the ability at the high end to do photorealism. And what we're doing with augmented reality in Pokemon Go is like the first shot across the bow of what will be completely immersive realities. And I think it's going to be exciting when we start to think about the implications of no longer sharing the same reality, even when we're together.
Awesome.
democratization of content creation. Once it is as easy to create AR content as it is to publish a YouTube video, the world will change dramatically. And that's not very far away.
Great.
Yeah, it's truly about technology and experiences and building it together. How do you advance the technology to better the experience? The holographs that are added, can you take into account other senses? There is light, there is touch, other things that need to happen to make it a truly human experience. So what we are trying to do here is actually humanize the technology. Audio, can it be intelligent enough that it can actually sense the space around you while giving you the audio features back? So from our perspective, the future computing platforms, it's all about context, presence, intelligence, and overall the experience that it's going to create.
Can I ask a question about this? This humanized thing is really fascinating. I don't know if you saw Mark Zuckerberg's demo of Oculus with the basically conferencing capabilities. And one of my friends commented on Facebook, where are their legs? And I replied, in VR, you don't need legs. And in fact, you don't really need a torso either. And there's a big question whether you need a head. And so is humanizing the right path, or are we transcending human and finding sort of new, more interesting ways to experience the world around us? Why do we need these bodies? This is an opportunity to go beyond that. And I think you'll see a lot of that coming up.
I think an interesting part of the cycle, too, is that when we look at new hardware coming in, when you're working for a hardware company, as when I worked for Mattel, our shared alma mater, our purpose when we're working with a hardware company is to show the power of the hardware and the new technology. And we're trying to do that in a way that shows both the shock and awe of, wow, look what we can do, which is a first impression that can drive sales. And to the points of some of the other people in the panel, we're also trying to deliver something that is a fulfilling, memorable experience, as opposed to merely look at all the pretty colors. Because that's what will keep people coming back and actually using the device. We have to do both. And in fact, if you look at the introduction of new video game systems, you will see products which are aimed at the shock and awe side, and you will also see specifically very other games that are aimed at a longer, deeper relationship. So when we now look at VR, I think that we are this cycle where we have both incredibly original sorts of hardware takes on the concept and on the philosophy of how that hardware can and should work. As a software person, what I see is that first wave going on, and then the second wave is for people who are not working for a hardware company, where you are simply saying, what experience can I create for whatever hardware I choose to support? You skip that first phase of show off the hardware, and you go ahead to, all right, how can I provide a long-term experience, especially today where we are not out to just get one sale, thank you, it's done. Now we have to, in order to make money, we have to build a continuing relationship with the player and give them a reason to keep coming back. And AR, of all the new technologies I've seen, gives users the greatest reason, potentially, to keep coming back.
Great. Were you going to say something?
I was going to add that,
Yeah.
that's all that is a really good point. And I think one of the things that we're thinking about, basically the, Pokemon Go is a Unity app, right? And what we want to see happen for AR and VR mixed reality to thrive is for some sort of convergence where you don't have to go into an app to discover things. It's, the web, the metaverse maybe. You have layers of reality that they're continuously being updated, and the cloud's a big part of that. And I see the devices really as just being sort of the receivers of that. And so a lot of the work that we're thinking about is how to basically render things in a way that if you mix them together, they actually can be composited and look real. And you can then blend different realities, different layers together. And we have an analog of that with the web, where we can embed a YouTube video in a page or an article in a Facebook feed. We have to do the same thing volumetrically, and that's something that is going to be exciting, both for the quality of the content, but also for the kinds of things that have been not really possible in the app model. So the blending of these different layers is going to be really cool.
I love this idea of blending reality and customizing reality, because I think that's really what we're talking about when we say augmented or mixed reality. It's living in the reality that you want to live in. And years and years ago, when desktop computers first came out, there was a After Dark program that allowed you to customize your screen as a screensaver with like funny little bits, and it was like a big deal. It's like, oh look, I have personality on my computer screen. And if you think about where we're heading in just about every business, it's being able to customize how we actually perceive reality. And I think that's really exciting. I just love that we're on a panel talking about immersive holographic experiences and metaverses, and we're definitely in the future. So.
And of course, we see it rendered on the news every day.
Right.
Right, are there any Trump supportors here?
Don't get
Because
him
if there-
started. Don't get Dimitri started.
Because if there are, they're living in a wonderful new reality, right? Their own reality.
Trumpality.
And you can define your own laws of physics in that. You can say what's right or wrong, and here it is. And it seems to be working for a large portion of our population.
Yeah.
And so I feel really good about sort of timing of our endeavors here, of helping
Great.
to change.
So you look at this as kind of enabling that?
Absolutely. So I'm voting for Trump. Yes, I am. Oh, rooting. Yes, I'm rooting for him to come over to my house.
Okay, so addressing Hollywood's creative community, how is creative content going to change? Will augmented reality be a format change or just an extension of something that we're already familiar with? Craig, you want to start?
I like that you pulled us back, Nancy. Thank you. We were just about to head off the
That's
cliff.
what moderators do.
That's very nice. Good moderation. Yes, I think that we are looking at a format change. You know, I think that there's been a big break between passive media and interactive participatory media. People, you know, since going back to like the humanity of what we like to do, we like to be told stories, we like to read, we like to think, we like to contemplate, and we like to be in a place of reflection. And we also like to play sports, and we like to tell the story of what we did and how we do it and how we play together. And we learn to socialize through gameplay. And we learn a lot of like morality and life lessons through shared like linear media, whether it's paintings on cave walls or you know, the Titanic movie and thinking about life and impermanence and everything else. So I think that with augmented reality, it's a format shift in that we're going into a space that will blur the lines between the passive and the active, and also create the opportunity for more like a consistent relationship, like you guys were saying earlier, where it's not necessarily that I'm just enjoying a product or a discrete application. That may be the case, but the successful brands, like Pokemon has the opportunity to do, will just be part of the fabric of your experience in many different layered ways. And you'll enable basically more like a theme party, the theme of the brand and the universe and the experience that you want to extend into. And that may sometimes be a complete replacement of reality through virtual reality, where you're encapsulated in the brand and the destination and the activity. Or it may just be a light theming, because while I'm looking at all of you, I like to see little Pokemon running around. Because in my world, that's the world I want to live in.
Yeah, I mean, I think going back, you know, to what I was saying earlier about these layers of reality and how, you know, publishing content, regardless of the format, is going to be much more like a cloud. And you have the experience of the web browser. There isn't the idea of permanence really in your browser, but you also don't have the performance of apps. And I think that the metaverse of AR is going to be something that has to have the best of all those properties. And I was describing earlier how I was thinking visually you can sort of overlay different things, but also the behavior of an object of things together. Like when you take things from two different universes and bring them together, it could be really interesting. And we've had some interesting experiences with big brands, like doing the websites for Disney.com and Marvel and ESPN for VR. What does Disney.com look like in VR? Disney said, well, it's got to be the Magic Castle. And this is a shareable page, so if you go on Oculus Social, others can see you there. So you can imagine objects, things that are related to a brand or IP, kind of starting from a URL that may not be a web page, but more of a spatial location, and being able to sort of mix things together can be really, really cool. So yeah, there's a lot of thought that's going to go into how this is all going to look and work in the coming years.
Great.
I just say that, you know, augmented reality is cousin to virtual reality. I mean, we're talking about immersive technologies. Pokemon Go is a pretty cool little augmented reality experience on a what's really kind of a traditional mobile app, meaning that game is designed for a smartphone, and smartphone games are about tapping and clicking and dealing with three-dimensional content on a very flat 2D surface. In immersive virtual reality, it's a completely different experience. It's a different language, really, in designing this type of content, because you're moving into a space, a virtual reality space or an augmented reality space, where the content is all around you. And the way you interact with that content is very different. The language is completely different. It's no longer about swiping and tapping. It's about gestures. Now you can include biometrics. It's about understanding how you're even reacting emotionally to content. I think there's a completely new language that's being created around this type of content. And Pokemon Go, like I said, it's nice that it's getting mentioned as an augmented reality game, but I really don't consider it one. I think that we haven't really seen true augmented reality experiences on the consumer side. We've seen some examples with HoloLens and some of the more sophisticated devices where you can walk through and spatially feel like that content is with you. And that's coming very fast, and it's here in many ways, but I think it's completely two different worlds in some ways as well. Yeah.
And I think that one of the things we really need to think about as we use the technology is, are we looking for a solo, one-on-one relationship with our player, or are we looking to create a social experience? Because I think that whole role of how the creative and how the storytelling happens are fundamentally different in these two experiences. If we're creating an environment and telling a story, sharing a world with a single player, we're creating willing suspension of disbelief, bringing you into that world. That is one creative mindset, it is one creative approach, and it's saying we have thousands of years of experience doing, we're just adapting to new technologies. I was originally trained in the theater, which was really convenient when the video game business started, was to have that background. On the other hand, if we are doing social games where we're trying to get, as Pokemon Go does, where we're trying to get thousands or millions of people to engage in activities and ideally get to know each other, interact with different places, the entire process of game design and storytelling changes. Because now it is less about the direct story, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, denouement. It is now more about the set design and creating the world. We did a game called Neverwinter Nights years ago that we ended up winning a technical Emmy for. And the one thing I think that unlocked it, we were able to break through on technology before anybody else and add graphics to what had been a very primitive text types of games. And I've always said the reason we did that is that at the very start we said, this is not going to be telling a story, this is going to be designing sets and places and locations and character actors to interact with while you develop your own stories as a group, and we give you the excuse for that. That's what I think we ended up being honored for, rather than for a technical breakthrough.
Great. Anyone else? Okay, Jules, speaking of creative content, how is Otoy overcoming the ongoing hurdles of, putting together mixed reality, photorealistic AR and mixed reality?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a tough problem to solve. And I brought these prototypes because they really do sort of show some of the challenges. These go at 120 hertz. They're 16 times the resolution in terms of pixels as the Gear VR. And if you're going to have really high quality content that is beamed into your eyes at this resolution, the only way to do that is really through streaming. So a lot of the work that we've been doing has been around light field based compression and even rendering. So when we're creating assets, even if it's going to go into an interactive layer, we generate a light field which is like a holographic bubble around around an object, and that can be streamed down. And it can you can also use that information to have it be lit and to also cast shadows. And it's very efficient on the client side. So most of the wearables that are going to be powering AR for the foreseeable future are going to be, they're going to be like mobile phones. They'll have the same chips. And but yet the graphics demands are going to be much higher than what you have on a PC or TV. So in order to do that, holographic streaming is a really big part of making that work, and that's one of the things we're focused on from A to Z.
Awesome, awesome. Anybody else commenting on?
Yeah, it's all about pushing the technology to the fullest. I mean, how he was mentioning, it's all about computational graphics and everything coming together. So companies like Intel, I mean, Intel of course is a part of it, but there are many others too. Be it the 3D cameras, be it the sensors, it all has to come together to drive. Intel recently did this partnership with Microsoft with the HoloLens, so that now it's open sourcing the hardware, you can and the APIs for RealSense, and then you have a platform available that for the first time now you can use any manufacturer and go out and create a world-class VR platform. So it's truly about taking those technologies, making them available to the public, and have them scale. So.
And of course, experiences are a function of relationship. So in this case, the human experiencing them and this hardware that we're dealing with now. And you can tweak the hardware side, and certainly we're doing a lot of that, but you can also tweak the human side of it. For example, there's chemistry. If you've ever tried microdosing LSD, that dramatically changes your perception. And if you put on a VR headset in that scenario, it's pretty amazing already what we have. And then of course, if you take a full dose or double the dose, then all kinds of marvelous things can happen. So and certainly in Silicon Valley, if you've been reading the news, a lot of us have explored these other types of technologies, and I think they're going to work marvelously together. So I very much believe that you'll have innovation on sort of both sides of the equation. And perhaps the biggest sort of gains can be gained on that chemical side versus the hardware side.
So as Intel, we focus on the hardware side.
I don't think anybody had any doubts.
So I know you mentioned about the humanizing, we need to humanize. In all reality, we are truly trying to say, how does technology get you as close to the human behavior as possible? So we do take the human elements in, but not as far as the chemical reactions in human beings that we're talking about here. Simple things like spatial cameras. I forget the name of the company, but it's the one that's making those 360-degree cameras all around. I think OXO, yeah, OXO is the name. What they're doing it is very simple, is of course there are cameras all around, but a simple thing like each one of the two cameras is exactly the distance that your eyes are separated. So what they're the reason I'm giving that example is all they're trying to mimic is how would you naturally see it, and let the technology go up and try to mimic it to the best way possible. And our belief is truly that the closer you get to the human behavior, the more real or immersive, or however you call it, the mixed reality it's going to seem.
Awesome. Anybody else? We're good? All right. Well, let's talk about social media and AR. How has social media propagated the success of AR? And also, besides just virally spreading the word, how can Facebook and other social media platforms really integrate augmented reality into their canvas, into who they are? Don?
I think that Facebook and social media represent the most obvious and apparent opportunity for virality in terms of people get excited about something and they share it. So I think that actually it's very much like the hallways in a junior high school, which is to some degree where those services began in terms of spreading that. But if first you need to create the experience, you cannot depend upon social media to create excitement until you have built something exciting. Once you've built something exciting, it'll largely work on its own and you can fan the flames. But a lot of people try and fan the flames before a spark has happened.
You know, I would go back to the Oculus keynote with Zuckerberg showing, basically Facebook social. And what's so interesting about it is that after all of this work for Oculus VR and games and all these things, really what was compelling was that it's just three people around a table. Maybe the environment's a VR environment, maybe it's not. But you can tell that the design language for Oculus and the way that Facebook's looking at it is basically augmented reality or mixed reality. And the layer that, you can block out the environment around you if you want to, but it's very much about sharing experiences. And of course, seeing that happen this early into what they're trying to do is pretty cool. And certainly that standalone headset will turn into a pair of glasses. Like they've pretty much telegraphed that that's kind of where they want everything to go. And social and discovery is going to be really powerful for this platform.
No, I agree with Jules. I mean, the first thing I thought of was the social VR that Zuckerberg was showing, and it's a virtual reality experience. We could see how that can transcend into different hardware and having more augmented reality sharing as well in a group space. But the fact that they're moving so quickly in that and getting the awareness around immersive technologies through Oculus, through these types of experiments, because most of the VR that we see, frankly, is the shooter game kind of content. People don't really think about social interaction in virtual reality. Virtual reality is typically considered a pretty isolated experience. So the fact that they're bringing that all together in a social way is really powerful, I think, and it's going to be a great use case. The other thing that comes to mind when we talk about social apps, and nobody really talks about, is the most popular augmented reality that we're seeing in apps across the board is on Snapchat. And it's not really referred to as augmented reality, but it is augmented reality, and it's actually much more sophisticated than Pokemon Go's augmented reality because it's actually using recognition and tracking. And that's the filters that are camera facing towards you on your face, and you're mapping digital characters. You've seen like the licking dogs and all the different characters that people are sharing. And I would have to imagine that's the most widely used augmented reality social app. And it's just called a face filter, I guess, but it's, and which is fine because, the technology needs to just disappear and it just has to become a good user experience. But this is social sharing of mixed reality experiences at a very mass scale. I think that needs to be brought into the conversation as well.
I think that, like good media has a reason to exist, right? Like you're going to tell a story, you're going to have impact, you're going to change somebody's opinion. A writer doesn't sit down and write something necessarily just because they have to, unless they're still in school or something. You want to have impact. And I think a lot of times with technology, we get caught up in the idea that we have technology and we're excited about the technology for the sake of the technology. And at the end of the day, if you just drill back, like you guys are saying, to what's the social interaction, many times the social desire or the human need or the connectivity opportunity is really simple and almost stupidly easy from a technological point of view. But it's getting teams to think differently about the tool sets they have, because like we could have done Pokemon Go 8 years ago. I mean, there's no real technology, and some of us did. It's really just in, are you bringing people into the right on-ramp to experience something that is impactful to their lives?
Well, and of course, Facebook itself is an augmented reality app. We keep thinking of augmented reality as being something visual, something that we sort of overlay visually. But presence, this feeling that other people are there, that you are not alone, is Facebook's sort of most deep augmented reality. That's why we reach for that phone. That's why it's become the behemoth that it's become, because it's solving, again, a fundamental problem in what we're predisposed to as humans. We feel lonely, and of course the first world problems are loneliness and boredom. So we're lonely and bored, and no longer tigers chasing us. And so we reach for this thing, and when we have it, we feel, it evokes a feeling in us. We feel that we're not alone, and that certainly, in my mind, is augmented reality.
Great. Okay. All right, so we focus quite a bit on gaming and entertainment for augmented reality, but what other applications are you seeing that are being used out there for industry and educational use and business? Brian, you have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, we're deep in targeting industry with augmented reality. The smart helmet, which is a DAQRI product, is designed for industries like oil and gas, construction, mining. These are the industries that see extreme value in having digital content right in front of you, contextually relevant to what you're looking at in real time. The Internet of Things, we all know about the Internet of Things by now, and this is data that is not being it's being stored in databases and cloud servers, but how do you access all this data? How do you understand it in real time and get that data? So these types of devices, these heads-up displays that can give you relevant information about sensor readings and things like that in real time are extremely valuable. And we're deep into doing pilot programs now with these devices with Fortune 500 companies, and they're seeing cost savings, efficiencies, safety, and it's billions of dollars of meaningful change in the way we do business using these type of augmented reality experiences. So clearly it's here and it's very strong on the enterprise side. It's fun to talk about the kinds of storytelling we can do on the consumer side, but there's real applications for this technology, and it's being adopted at a wide pace right now, at a rapid pace, I should say.
Free public bathrooms.
That too. Yeah, that too.
See,
I love your answers.
when
I
you
wanna
have
go
a
to your
sense
panel.
of you have to go pee, the ability to have a sixth sense of where the free public bathrooms are is a great utility. And I think we should clean, thank you.
Well,
And
they'll
so
be
I
upgraded,
think we have the
downgraded.
capability right now to start solving those kinds of problems, and we're certainly working on that.
I think that one of the most immediate things that a good AR wearable will solve it. As mentioned, with these glasses or this resolution, I mean, the first thing that I noticed when I put these on for the first time earlier this year was that I can watch an IMAX movie and it looks just like being in an IMAX movie theater screen. I mean, I don't need to go to a theater to have that experience now. Also, my 1080p monitor, I can have hundreds of them all around me. So anything that's a legacy application, productivity applications, Photoshop, certainly design where you can also see it in 3D, those things moving into AR immediately change the way that your desktop set up, the way that all your other screens connect to your life. And the last one probably will be the phone, because that is something that we're just so used to having at our fingertips. But even that is something where, with gesture recognition, just every other screen that is limited by a rectangle will totally fundamentally change when you have good AR. And that's not that far off. That's next year.
Great. More comments? What else you seeing out there?
I mean, again, like we've talked about, there's this kind of split between, industry, training, and consumer touch. And I think some of the most interesting things that I'm seeing right now on the consumer side is things like The Void. If people have seen that, they have a Ghostbusters experience in New York that they've opened up. Being able to actually manufacture a physical reality that maps to a virtual reality and bringing sensation into the experience of an augmented social experience, I think that's going to be transformative for location-based experiences. Being able to have a theme park anywhere you go, with your friends, and then actually be able to have these installations in malls which are looking for ways to kind of bring people out and re-engage. I think we're going to start to see a lot of things that allow you to have dinner on the African savannah, or be able to feel like you're on a ship underwater exploring the ocean and the coral reefs, or fighting ghosts, and not just visual, but all the senses, smell, touch, taste, everything else will be part of that holistic experience. The Matrix is coming.
I love how we're talking about it as being in the future rather than it happened a few years ago, and here we are. Right?
That's true.
But you're looking at me like I'm sitting here, but I'm not.
Right. Well, I know you were at Google, so you already plugged into Skynet, and I want to ask that offline because clearly this is all part of the plan. And
I love it. Okay, any other comments on that, heading in? All right. I want to go back for a minute to the content creation and storytelling that we talked about earlier, and the challenges of balancing sort of user-created content, where the player drives the narrative, with a directed experience, which is a linear narrative. And since this is Digital Hollywood, and we have a lot of writers and content creators here, how does the integration of augmented reality affect that balance? Craig, you want to start? Talk about that a bit?
I'm sorry, I want to defer to my colleague on my left.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, please?
Craig knows the question.
I'm sorry. we digressed.
Yeah, it's the balance of user-created content
Yes.
versus the linear narrative, and how are writers going to be writing for that? What's your advice for that?
I think that's a really interesting question. I think that what we've found in bringing Hollywood and games together has always been a challenge in different roles within the community, because some people want to like a director wants to direct the user action and experience generally and create a vision of what the audience is going to see, feel, and take away as an auteur. When you have a game, it's really the player that's in control. They need to be able to go where they want to go, explore what they want to do. Pacing kind of goes out the window because they might spend a minute in a room or an hour in a room. And having that flexibility means that it's much more about world creation and general goal creation, which tends to favor writers, because writers are thoughtful about what is the world, what are the characters, what's the backstory. So game talent, as kind of like a, fits really well with writer, crafting, universe creation, world building, more so than some other talents in Hollywood that want to direct the experience. So I think that as we move now into this augmented world and social engagement, it's another step, right, of kind of giving the community, empowering the community to create the stories, tell their tales. You're seeing this on Snapchat and Instagram now with like the little story filters. And user-created content, whether it's on YouTube, Snapchat, or in augmented reality, I think we're going to start to see a lot more of people using the tools of augmented reality to celebrate their own stories as much as the stories that we create. So, but I think it'll go back to world building and world creation and world design. And directors, writers, producers that think about a universe and then the expression of stories in that universe, I think will tend to be better suited to where we're going.
Yep.
Sorry. I was going to say that I think augmented reality is a radically different medium and is primarily triggered off of sensors. It's a sensor-based medium, meaning it's triggered off a location like Pokemon Go. It's triggered off of computer vision of looking at the world and understanding the world. So like the people, the places, the things that are part of that environment are the triggers for the augmented reality experience in many ways. So it's difficult for somebody to try to navigate a linear story through that. You could, but I don't think it would be using the power of the technology. So I think it's going to take almost a radical rethinking of how do I utilize the sensors for the experience and then navigate a story with that. So, I mean, I was doing a lot of experimentation with biometrics in augmented reality and how content can change based on my stress levels, my heart rate, things like that. That's a completely different way of thinking,
Yeah.
Is the vampire, the horror thing gonna react differently because I'm not scared or I'm scared, and kind of ratchet things up based on biometrics? That's a completely different kind of future scenario, but that's, I think, where we're moving with the types of stories where the environment understands me. It understands who I am, and it'll react to me, based on my speed. There's in the designing for augmented reality, you talk about room space, putting digital content around the room, and you talk about body space, the content that actually follows me around, whether it's my heads-up display, navigation, things like that. So it's a completely different language in many ways. So I agree that gaming is kind of the more natural extension into this space in many ways. And somebody who comes from traditional linear content is going to struggle not only getting into the game space, but then taking a much larger leap into the immersive space. So I think the work that's happening in VR right now is definitely applicable, and there's a lot of work clearly happening there. But with augmented reality, I think it adds another level of complexity. So,
Yeah, and I think that as we look at it, first of all, obviously not all augmented reality is going to be storytelling. But in those cases where we are storytelling, in the end, stories are in quest of a resolution. We are looking for some kind of answer. We may be looking for a distraction like a soap opera that can run for 22 years with a lot of little resolutions as we go, but we tend to crave fulfilling, meaningful resolutions. Everybody was talking about the fact of looking for meaning in what we write, for looking to create art, not just products. And I think that when we're trying, what we've learned in games, especially in online games, where we have massively multiplayer experiences, is we got very used to creating these narrow little box canyons in video games where we would guide our players through a carefully choreographed experience. In fact, if you go back and look at a game like The Lord of the Rings that we did, we were recreating scenes from the movie, but if you pulled the camera back and looked at the 3D, you would actually see that there were this series of box canyons in each case. And we would create the illusion of openness, but the space you were in was actually limited in ways that we tried to make subtle. and we tried to do things to make it seem like we were breaking the plane when we weren't. With AR, where we add the element of place, it's very hard to create box canyons. And so the skill goes from more of the scripting a precise experience to more of the creating the sandbox, even more so than we've seen with other technologies and games. So I agree, those who are the writers who create worlds will have a great advantage. Those who need to control every detail, if you are in online games, one of the first things you have to accept is that you are giving up much of your control, and you have to be happy living in that world.
That's a great answer. Anybody else?
Yeah, I was going to say that just thinking about linear content for a minute in AR, I still want to read comic books or watch movies, and when you're telling a story, and I've tried, branching movies and even branching comics aren't that fun. I mean, there is a lot of great storytelling that is just linear, and it demands that you sort of sit there and experience it. However, in AR, some of the things that we're thinking about is for the first time, I can actually have a comic book that is, I can change the scale of it. It can look perfect. When it's a double page spread, it can sort of open up in front of me. Just the act of reading and looking at that is very different. Also for movies, the idea of having a screen that is 240 degrees around you, and that's just a linear film. I mean, that's a great experience. And being able to have that sort of go into different modes where, instead of having your phone go into full screen or tilt it, you can just drop something on the table, and all of a sudden you're seeing a shrunk down version of that movie, with characters that are splatted somewhere. That's something that could be really interesting. Even watching sports makes a lot of sense, right? You can have close-ups where you can drop the arena down and onto your hand. So just the kinds of linear experiences we have from live broadcasts for television, for movies, books even, having that translated into the spaces that you can have with AR, I think will make those experiences very compelling. It's one of the first things we want to, I think, see happen. Yeah.
Dimitri?
I'm not going to answer.
Okay.
I thought those were all awesome. I've got nothing to
They're
add.
all great, okay.
Other than like more chemistry stuff, but I think you guys are tired of that, so I'll stay away from that.
Okay, great. So what do you guys think of about privacy issues in location-based services as an issue? Let's talk about that.
I always say when privacy comes up, which it comes up a lot, is that the conversation shouldn't be about privacy right now, and in many ways we hate to hear it, but our privacy is kind of over. Maybe that's a whole debate, but it should be about transparency, and I think understanding how our data is used and having the power personally to control that data filter, if you will, is the next conversation we should be having, because the cat's out of the box. It's kind of Pandora's box. I mean, there's cameras everywhere. There's probably watching us walk through the halls here. There's cameras on all our devices. There's gonna be cameras on our wearables. So that's gonna be definitely, there's gonna be a lot of debates and noise around that for a long time. But once we turn the conversation to transparency, I think it's gonna get a lot more productive. So I'll just say that.
100% agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll add the word privacy in there, privacy and safety maybe in there too. Craig?
Well, I mean, again, one of my favorite things is to look at the warning signs that come up when you start Pokemon Go, because every warning label tells a story, right? It's like, don't use Pokemon Go at night on an ice field. And you're like, huh, I wonder what happened there. But it's, I think privacy is a really big issue that, especially with kids, like we've tried to wrestle with that on the internet. The framework of how do you enforce the privacy controls? How do you do, I mean, like Eddie Izzard has a great bit about the terms of service with the Apple, iTunes agreement. And every time he agrees, a piece of him dies because, like, he never reads it. And it's just this big, long thing. And he says, I agree. I heard a story that Yahoo had a thing where they wouldn't sell your privacy data. And at like 11:59, they would update the terms of service and say, oh, actually we will. They'd sell it, and then at 12, they say, oh, we don't. Right? Because when in 1 minute, it was okay, right? We can update the terms of service anytime. I don't know if that's true or not, so if anybody's here from Yahoo, I apologize, but it was just a story I heard. But you can see the challenge with these things. We're in a dynamic medium with companies that are dynamic, with terms that are changing, and a lifestyle that is so beset by requests that we don't really understand, and that our politicians don't understand the ramifications of what we're doing. And then we're racing ahead with genetic privacy issues too, right? So what happens when you can look at a social data map of what you connect into, and a relationship map of who you know and who you associate with, and a genetic map of what is your profile and predispositions genetically to certain activities, and you can correlate behavior and put out a precognitive result that says, you know what, 87% certainty that this person is going to commit a crime in the next 3 days. I'm the mayor of a town. Do I have a moral obligation on behalf of my community to intercede and take that person off the streets, whether or not they've created a crime? We're now in a place where we can map that, and it's actually happening. There's a guy at Amazon that's a precognitive load balancing inventory specialist. And all he does is look at purchasing behaviors of what people are ordering, anticipates what they're going to order next, and ships it to the nearest site so it's there in 2 hours. They're doing this through privacy mapping of purchasing. We're going to do that with everything, right? But the dialogue is so far away from even talking about it that, anyway, I think it's a fascinating issue, so to speak. Sorry.
You mentioned safety too, and that brings up a whole different level. It's not the privacy constraints. I mean, safety, I mean, we've heard all kinds of incidents that have happened. In Japan now, which is now changing how people do things, there's signs put over, I forget the Japanese word for it, but there are now warning signs to say you may not walk while staring at your phone. So that's a new thing that has come about. There's the YouTuber who's detained right now because he was trying to catch Pokemons actually in a church. Yeah. So things are changing. The key here is there's immense amounts of data, and somebody said it's no more just a privacy issue because that has happened. It's happened prior to this. It's now layers of data, and it's going one after the other, and how are you consolidating it, and what are you doing with it, shipping it back? So now, if you think about it, somebody's tweeting they're going on a vacation, the car is in the garage, there is already data that shows that the electronic doors have not been used. All this data is disconnected. We're all going to tie it together, and then somebody has the power, of course, to put it together and use to bad uses. So that has to be avoided, but privacy, it's no more just about don't share it. It's there, it's already there. Your life is public, so.
There was somebody that was looking at the temperature of houses as an indicator of when people were home and when they weren't, because the fluctuation in when you turn on your heat or you turn on your lights is a fingerprint of use. So like, you know, it's not just the data that we are using with our, you know, conscious data. It's data just that we use by existing. And as we start to get better and better systems for identifying all that, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, maybe privacy can't be saved, or maybe you have to pay for privacy, and that'll be the next big, you know, growth opportunity for, you know, this hotel is a private hotel, and I'm going to pay a premium because it's insulated. Actually, that's probably a great growth opportunity. You know,
Business opportunity.
Yeah, there's probably a business opportunity as people really start to become aware of all the data that we are broadcasting and not really fully aware of how you can draw those lines together.
And I think that actually when we're thinking, particularly the apps and online products, thinking about what your business model is and whether you need to sell data for your business model or not, because there's one team I work with where they have definitely, by taking a very narrow range of data that they retain and being very public about that and saying, we don't retain anything but this, we only do this in the aggregate, they have actually been able to help build an audience simply by saying, yes, you may be losing privacy everywhere else in the world, but here, we're not going to sell your data. It's not part of what we do. This is how we do our business. And we're only using this much, and this is how we're using it. It actually becomes a promotional marketing methodology of saying, whatever else is going on somewhere else, it won't be here that you're losing privacy.
Although there's obviously very questionable value in that. There's a marketing message, but so far we've seen no signs of consumers actually really caring about privacy. We very easily trade it off for convenience or novelty. We talk a big game about it, but at the end of the day, at least in mass, we don't care.
Yeah, we click
We,
accept.
we've all actually become exhibitionists. We voluntarily brag to the world about our goings-on, and we celebrate those who have large followings, which again is sort of the obverse of privacy. All of our children want to become celebrities. We're living in a world that, like I said, I don't think really cares about privacy anymore.
Okay, let's open it up for questions in our last 5 minutes. Sir.
Thank you for your question about the narrative storytelling in AR. That's my primary concern as a screenwriter and producer. And I was wondering if, just as hyperlinks have become common in articles, if you see for narrative entertainment the possibility of AR forming an integral part of traditional entertainment with an augmented reality component. And I was also wondering, I'm very familiar with Ingress though because I'm Apple. I was never actually able to play it. I'm wondering if, apart from its proof of concept application, if you have any thoughts as to why it didn't become more successful, what the problems with it were, because I just thought it was amazing.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
With Ingress, we were launching games around the same time, similar location-based augmented reality type games, and learned very quickly that the demographic of people that want to run around, get off the couch and actually run around the world and hunt things out, is not that large. Now, Pokemon the exception, because of the IP, but Ingress being, in my opinion, is very sort of hardcore sci-fi kind of theme. So you have to look at the demographics, not only from sci-fi and people that want to sort of have these, fantasy sort of parallel world experiences. That's one demographic, but then those that are willing to run around the world and sort of treasure hunt and play around with territories and things like that, then your demographic is smaller. So looking at the market size, I think is pretty key if you're looking at the success of something. I would look at IPs like Pokemon or the Harry Potters of the world or things like that to achieve success with these. I think it would be, my personal opinion again, it would be very challenging for somebody to try to launch an original IP with this kind of a mechanic, and it's asking a lot of the user. So that's just one thought I would put around it. So.
And what about integrating AR into traditional narrative?
Yeah. The integration of augmented reality on Pokemon is done subtly, and it's enough to sort of give you that illusion, that bridge that gap, that there's digital content around you. So I guess it would depend on the story you're trying to create. There's probably a good place for it, but my feeling is I want to go the entire way to an immersive experience with AR rather than these kind of short burst experiences. You're dealing with arm fatigue if you want to do anything longer than a few seconds. So you can establish something, find something off of a poster or a book or maybe on the table and establish a story element, but then you'd want to move on. So.
But kind of like 3D movies, like you can see an application of like an AR glasses system like the ODG glasses where I'm in my living room, I'm watching, Paranormal Activity, and suddenly there's like fuzzy stuff happening in the corner of my eye. I'm seeing that experience widen beyond the screen, even if it's a linear experience on the screen. Now it can, in not just kind of a faux 3D way in that box, for the right kind of content, the right kind of applications, you can actually see that material extend and envelop so that things come literally from behind me, around me, in
Great.
cool ways.
You have a question? You had your hand raised?
I just wanted to push back a little on the issue of privacy because whenever you have a collaborative system, you're revealing your input to that system to a certain degree. But I will say that even in the mid-90s when I was building Gracenote, we were taking data from everybody, and I was a card-carrying member of the EFF and had read David Brin and pushed that system to be architected to have unique anonymous user, have the key encryption
I hate to break this party up because we're having so much fun, but we've reached our time limit. So could we please give our panelists a round of applause? And thank you so much for being a great audience, and we appreciate it. Thank you. Jennifer.
Hey, John.